The fabric of her sleeve twisted under his grip, the emerald silk protesting more loudly than she did. Mina looked down at Marcus's fingers, white-knuckled and possessive, digging into the delicate material of her gown. They were in a small, sound-dampened alcove just off the main ballroom of the Obsidian Gala, but the thrum of the orchestra and the murmur of 1,000 conversations still bled through the walls. It was a sound like the ocean, vast and indifferent. "You have no right," Marcus hissed, his voice a low, furious counterpoint to the distant civility. His face, usually arranged in a mask of practiced easygoing charm for clients and cameras, was tight with rage. The smile he wore for the world was a weapon, and when it was gone, what remained was sharp and ugly. "You have no right to be here." "You have no right to speak to me." Mina did not try to pull her arm away. She had learned long ago that struggling only tightened the grip, only escalated the fury. Instead, she kept her eyes fixed on his hand, on the way his expensive watch glinted under the recessed lighting. It was a watch she had helped him pick out, a gift to himself for landing the Kanazawa Tower project. Her project. "I only asked for a mention, Marcus," she said. Her voice was quiet, not weak. Quiet. It was a voice that had learned to occupy as little space as possible. A credit in the program, as lead designer. Lead designer? He laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound that held no humor. It was the sound of a dog protecting a stolen bone. "You were my assistant. You drew what I told you to draw. You organized my files. Don't get delusional just because they're giving me an award." He had not updated the file. He was working from a version of her that had never been accurate, a caricature of a meek, pliable girl who should be grateful for the opportunity to fetch his coffee and polish his awards. He had never seen the woman who spent 3 years sleeping in 4-hour increments, who filled sketchbooks with structural calculations that bordered on poetry, who understood the soul of a building better than he understood his own reflection. She had endured the stolen credit on smaller projects, the casual dismissals in board meetings, the way he would present her ideas as his own, his voice booming with a confidence he had not earned. She had endured it because she believed the work would eventually speak for itself. She believed in the integrity of lines on paper, in the mathematical truth of a well-designed, load-bearing wall. She thought talent was a currency that would, in the end, be honored. She had been wrong. The Kanazawa Tower was her masterpiece. It was a twisting column of glass and steel that seemed to defy gravity, a building that breathed with the city around it. She had dreamed it into existence on sleepless nights, her pencil moving across the vellum with a certainty that felt like channeling something divine. And Marcus had taken it. He had taken the files, scrubbed her name from the metadata, and presented it to Jaehua Kwan's development group as his singular vision. And now, tonight, the most prestigious architectural guild in the world was giving him the Visionary of the Year award for it. For her soul, it rendered in concrete and light. That was the line. That was the point past which endurance became complicity. So she had put on the emerald gown, a defiant splash of color in a life that had become muted gray, and she had come here, not to make a scene, just to ask, to make one final quiet appeal to a decency she knew, deep down, he did not possess. His grip tightened and he pulled her closer. The smell of expensive cologne and champagne was suffocating. "You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing yourself. Go home, Mina. Go back to your sad little apartment and be grateful I don't sue you for slander." She finally looked up, meeting his eyes. They were cold, flat, the eyes of a man who saw other people only as tools or obstacles. "Let go of my arm, Marcus." The quiet command, the lack of fear in her tone, sight seemed to enrage him more than any scream could have. His face darkened. "You have an obligation to me, to this firm. You will not ruin this for me." He began to pull her, dragging her out of the alcove and into the glittering periphery of the gala. Heads were turning. The soft bubble of conversation was pricked by whispers. The sight was jarring. The celebrated Marcus Thorne, man of the hour, manhandling a woman in an emerald gown who stood with the rigid posture of a statue resisting a storm. The laughter and the music seemed to fade into a dull roar in Mina's ears. This was it, the ultimate humiliation. To be not only erased, but to be publicly branded as hysterical, as a problem to be managed. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply stopped moving, planting her heels on the polished marble floor, so forcing him into a graceless tableau of tug-of-war. His performance was cracking. The relaxed posture, the easy swagger. It was all gone, replaced by the raw, ugly petulance of a spoiled child. I said, "Let go." Her voice was louder now, sharp with a clarity that cut through the mounting whispers. It was then that the atmosphere in the grand ballroom shifted. It was not a sudden change, but a slow, creeping one, like a drop of ink spreading through water. The conversations nearest them faltered first, then the ones further away. The music from the string quartet wavered, a violin trailing off mid-note. A heavy, profound silence began to settle over the room. The kind of silence that doesn't echo. The kind that settles. It was a silence that had a weight, a texture, a source. Marcus, blinded by his own rage, was the last to notice. He was still pulling at her arm, hissing at her to stop making a scene, oblivious to the fact that he had become the scene's unwilling focal point. Mina felt the change. She saw the guest's eyes lift from her and Marcus, shifting to a point somewhere behind them. She saw curiosity turn to apprehension, then to outright deference. A path was clearing in the crowd, not because anyone was asked to move, but because they instinctively chose to. A man was walking toward them. He was not rushing, he was not performing. He moved with an unhurried precision that was more commanding than any sprint. He wore a charcoal suit tailored with an almost mathematical perfection, the dark fabric seeming to absorb the light around him. His hands were in his pockets. His expression was one of absolute, unreadable calm. Mina had seen him before, saw in magazines and on financial news programs. Jae-hwa Kwon, the client, the head of the Kwon Group, the man who was funding the Kanazawa Tower. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see everything. He was a man who existed in a different stratosphere of power, a quiet sovereign in a world of loud pretenders. He stopped a few feet away from them. He did not look at Marcus. His gaze was fixed on Mina. It was a look of intense, unnerving focus, as if he were committing every detail of her face to memory. He saw the defiant set of her jaw, the exhaustion in her eyes, the faint tremor in her hand that she was trying so desperately to conceal. He saw her. Then his eyes moved slowly, deliberately, down to Marcus's hand, still clamped around her arm. Jae-hwa Kwon said nothing for a long moment. The silence in the room was now so absolute it felt like a physical pressure. He simply looked at the offending hand. He looked at it with a quiet, detached curiosity, the way a scientist might look at a specimen under a microscope just before dissecting it. Marcus finally registered the stillness, the hundreds of eyes on him. He followed their gaze and saw Jae-hwa Kwon. The color drained from his face. His grip on Mina's arm went slack, his fingers losing their strength as if his central nervous system had just been severed. "Mr. Kwon," Marcus stammered, snatching his hand back as if he'd touched a hot stove. He tried to assemble his charming smile, but it was a broken, twitching thing. "Just a small misunderstanding, with a former employee." A little overwrought, Jae-hwa's eyes lifted from Mina's arm back to Marcus's face. His expression did not change. It remained a mask of placid control. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, a quiet rumble that carried across the cavernous room with impossible clarity. "Take your hand off my architect." It was not a request. It was not a command. It was a statement of fact, correcting an error in the universe. Marcus froze, his mouth half open. The words didn't seem to compute. Your architect? Mr. Kwon, I am your architect." We have a contract. This is Mina Kim. She was my assistant. Jae-hwa gave a minuscule, almost imperceptible shake of his head. It was a gesture of profound, almost bored disappointment. You were the temporary placeholder for her firm, he said. His voice as steady as iron wrapped in silk. He took a step forward, placing himself between Mina and Marcus, a silent, unbreachable wall. He still hadn't looked directly at Marcus. His attention was on Mina, a silent question in his eyes. Are you all right? She gave the smallest of nods. Jae-hwa's gaze finally, dismissively, flicked to Marcus. Security, he said, the word spoken so softly it was almost a whisper. But it landed with the force of a gavel. Two men, dressed in suits identical to Jae-hwa's, materialized from the edges of the crowd. They had not been visible a moment before, yet now they were simply there, moving with a fluid, synchronized grace that spoke of immense training. They moved without wasted motion. They flanked Marcus, their presence overwhelming, their hands not yet touching him but promising that they would. Saw Marcus's face, which had been pale, was now slick with sweat. The panic was rolling off him in waves. Mr. Kwan, wait. This is a mistake. I'm the award winner. Tonight is my night. She's nobody. She's lying. Jae-hwa turned his back on him completely, a gesture of absolute dismissal. He addressed Mina, his voice now a private, gentle murmur meant only for her. I believe your evening was interrupted. Would you allow me to escort you somewhere more quiet? Behind him, Marcus began to bluster, his voice rising in panic as the security men took his arms. You can't do this. I have a contract. I'll sue. His voice was cut off as he was guided, firmly and irrevocably, toward a side exit. The crowd parted for them, as it had for Jae-hwa, but this time it was with a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. The visionary of the year, ejected from his own coronation. Mina watched him go, a strange numbness settling over her. She had imagined this moment, or some version of it, 1,000 times. A courtroom confession, a dramatic confrontation, but she had never imagined this quiet, effortless erasure, the antagonist's hollow, performed power collapsing in the face of a deep, quiet, structural power that didn't need to raise its voice. The crowd remained silent, watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Jae-hwa Kwan held out his hand, not to take hers, but as an offering, palm up, an invitation. Miss Kim, he said, his voice pulling her back from the brink of shock. The air on the terrace is much better. She looked at his hand, then at his face. His eyes were patient. There was no pity in them, only a calm, steady recognition. It was the most disorienting feeling in the world, to be seen correctly. After years of being misread, minimized, and misunderstood, the simple, direct clarity of his gaze was a shock to her system. Slowly, she put her hand in his. His skin was warm, his grip was firm, but it was not a grip of possession. It was a grip of support, a steadying anchor in the swirling chaos of the last 10 minutes. He led her through the stunned, silent crowd, which parted before them like the Red Sea. They walked past the head table where a place card with Marcus's name on it sat next to a gleaming, unbestowed award. They walked out through a set of tall glass doors and onto a deserted stone terrace overlooking the city. The night air was cool and clean. The distant sounds of traffic were a soft, rhythmic shushing. Below them, the city was a glittering tapestry of light and shadow, a million stories unfolding in silence. Jae-hwa released her hand and walked to the balustrade, leaning against it and looking out at the view. He gave her space, the silence a courtesy, allowing her a moment to breathe. Mina wrapped her arms around herself, the emerald silk of her dress cool against her skin. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, leaving a deep, trembling exhaustion in its wake. She thought about the last 5 years, the relentless work, the quiet hope, the crushing disappointment, the suffocating weight of being invisible. She thought about Marcus's face, twisted in a sneer, and the feeling of his fingers digging into her arm. She thought about the sudden, profound silence that had fallen over the ballroom. She did not know what to say. "Thank you" felt laughably inadequate. "Who are you?" felt absurd. She was standing on a terrace with one of the most powerful men in the country, a man who had just publicly dismantled her tormentor with a handful of quiet words. He spoke first, his voice still calm and low, not looking at her but at the skyline. The central spire of the Daewoo building. It uses a tuned mass damper to counteract wind shear. A simple, elegant solution, but predictable. He paused. Your design for the Kanazawa Tower doesn't counteract the wind. It harmonizes with it. The micro adjustments in the facade's tension cables, the flexible core. The building sways, but it sways like a dancer, not like a tree in a storm. It's not a solution. It's a philosophy. Mina stared at his back. He was talking about her design, not the version Marcus had presented. But the deeper, more complex mechanics she had detailed in her private notes she thought no one but her had ever seen. How did you know that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He turned to face her. In the moonlight, his features were stark, his eyes dark and intense. When your former boss presented his proposal, it was unimpressive. The aesthetics were striking, but the core engineering was pedestrian. He spoke of it with the passion of a man selling a product he did not understand. So I had my team conduct a due diligence review, a very, very thorough one. He took a small step closer. We analyzed the metadata on every digital file. We found the original drafts, the ones created late at night on a machine registered to Amina Kim. We found the ghost files, the deleted versions. We saw the evolution of the design. We saw your signature, your digital fingerprint on every brilliant idea, and we saw his, clumsily layered on top like a bad forgery. Mina felt her breath catch in her throat. He knew. He had known all along. He hadn't just stumbled into the confrontation. He had been waiting for it. The contract with Thorn Architecture was terminated an hour ago, he continued, his tone matter of fact. The termination clause was invoked due to gross misrepresentation and fraud. My legal team is already in possession of all the relevant files. They are quite comprehensive. She could only stare at him, her mind struggling to process the sheer scale of his actions. This wasn't just an intervention. It was a meticulously planned demolition. "I don't understand," she said, and it was the truest thing she had ever said. "Why?" Jay Hua looked at her. And for the first time, a flicker of something other than calm control crossed his face. It was something akin to admiration. "Because I am not in the business of building monuments to mediocrity, and I am not in the business of rewarding thieves." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "I want to build your building, Miss Kim. The one you designed, not the compromised version, the masterpiece." He held out a sleek, black business card. "My company is prepared to offer you a new contract. You will be the sole lead architect. You will have your own firm, your own team, and a budget that will not be a constraint. We will provide the legal framework, the financial backing, and the security to ensure there are no further interruptions." This was the offer of protection, but it was more than that. It was an offer of vindication. It was the world she had dreamed of, handed to her on a moonlit terrace by a man who moved like a shadow and spoke like a king. She looked from the card to his face. The shock was beginning to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This was real. This was happening. For years, she had been a ghost in her own life. Now, someone was seeing her. But the part of her that had learned to survive on its own, the part that had been forged in isolation, was wary. A gilded cage was still a cage. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked again, her voice stronger this time. She needed to understand the transaction. In her world, nothing was ever free. He considered her question for a moment. "Let's be clear, Miss Kim. I am not doing this for you. I am doing this for me. I want the best building. You are the one who can design it. It is a matter of quality control." His voice was devoid of sentiment, a brutally honest assessment, and in that honesty there was a strange kind of respect. He wasn't saving a damsel in distress. He was hiring the best person for the job. A tiny, wry smile touched Mina's lips. It was the first time she had smiled all night. It felt foreign on her face. And the scene in the ballroom? Was that quality control too? That, he said, his expression softening almost imperceptibly, was a personnel issue that needed to be addressed. He gestured with the card again. The choice is yours, of course. But the offer is not indefinite. We are scheduled to break ground in 3 months. She took the card. The cardstock was thick, heavy, the lettering embossed in a subtle, dark gray. Jae Hwa Kwan, chairman. The Kwan Group. There was only a phone number, no address, no email. It was a card that said, "If you have this number, you know how to reach me." She slipped it into the small clutch she carried. She felt the weight of it, a small, solid rectangle of possibility. The world had tilted on its axis. The path she had been on, a long, grinding road of quiet desperation, had vanished. A new one had been laid before her, paved and lit, and leading to a destination she had only ever allowed herself to dream of. But the man who had built the road was an enigma, a figure of immense, quiet power whose motives she couldn't fully grasp. "I will need to review the terms," she said, her voice formal, professional. It was a shield, a way to reclaim a piece of herself in this overwhelming moment. "Of course," he replied, nodding. "My legal team will be in contact with whomever you designate. In the meantime," he gestured back towards the city, "I have a car waiting. You should not have to return to the gala. I can have you taken home." Home. Her sad little apartment, as Marcus had called it. The place where her sketchbooks were piled high, where the ghost of the Kanazawa Tower lived on every wall. Suddenly, she was bone-weary, the events of the night crashing down on her like a physical weight. "Yes," she said, "thank you. I'd like that." He led her not back through the ballroom, but down a private service elevator that opened into a quiet, marble-lined garage. A black sedan, so polished it looked like a pool of liquid night, was waiting, a driver standing silently by the open rear door. It was another display of his seamless, invisible power. The world rearranged itself around him without fuss. The drive to her apartment was silent. Mina stared out the window at the blurred city lights, her mind a whirlwind. She was replaying the scene in the ballroom, the hush, the arrival, the quiet words that had shattered Marcus's world. She felt the ghost of his fingers on her arm and the solid warmth of Jae-hwa's hand in hers. She was oscillating between a terrifying sense of vulnerability and a giddy, disorienting sense of freedom. When they pulled up to her modest apartment building, a stark contrast to the opulence of the gala, Jae-hwa did not simply let her go. He got out of the car with her and walked her to the front door. "My head of security, Mr. Choi, will be in touch tomorrow," he said. "He will assess your residential security needs." Mina stopped. On her key, halfway to the lock. "That's not necessary." The instinct to refuse help, to be self-sufficient, was deeply ingrained. "Marcus Thorne is a man of vanity and limited imagination," Jae-hwa stated as if reading from a file. "When his legal options fail, he will resort to cruder methods of intimidation. It is predictable. Therefore, it is preventable. It is not a suggestion, Miss Kim. It is a condition of our new partnership." There it was again, the calm, unshakable assertion of control. But it was a control aimed at protecting her, not possessing her. It was a strange, new feeling. Anger at being handled warred with a profound sense of relief. She looked at him, standing under the flickering fluorescent light of her apartment building's entryway. The stark lighting should have made him look ordinary, but it only seemed to accentuate the sharp, clean lines of his face, the impeccable cut of his suit. He was a creature of a different world, standing on her doorstep. "And what if I don't agree to this partnership?" she challenged softly. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Then I will still ensure your safety, but I will have to find another architect. And that would be inefficient. I dislike inefficiency." She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right." She unlocked the door but did not open it. One more thing, Mr. Kwan. Jae-hwa, he corrected gently. Jae-hwa, she repeated, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. I am not your employee. If we do this, I am your partner. My firm may be new, but my vision is not. I expect to be treated as an equal. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the first genuine smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his severe features, making him look younger, more approachable. It reached his eyes, which lit with a warm, appreciative light. That is precisely why I chose you, Miss Kim, he said. I have no interest in partners who do not know their own value. He gave a slight bow of his head. Good night, Mina. And with that, he turned and walked back to the waiting car, disappearing into the night as silently as he had appeared. Mina stood in her doorway, watching until the black sedan was gone. She leaned against the doorframe, the cool metal a grounding force, and let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 5 years. The quiet exhaustion of long-term suffering was beginning to give way to something else, something sharp and terrifying and hopeful. The cold clarity of a final decision was upon her. She was going to take his offer. She was going to build her tower. The next few weeks were a blur of controlled, efficient activity. Jae-hwa's world, once it enveloped her, moved with the speed and precision of a military operation. The day after the gala, a man named Mr. Choi, with a polite smile and eyes that missed nothing, appeared at her apartment. He was Jae-hwa's head of security, an older man with the quiet demeanor of a scholar and the build of a man who could fold steel with his bare hands. He oversaw the installation of a new security system, changed her locks, and gave her a new phone, explaining that her old one was compromised. He did it all with a respectful deference that was somehow more intimidating than any overt threat. Simultaneously, a team of lawyers, so sharp and expensive they seemed to vibrate with intellectual energy, materialized. They listened intently as she explained her situation, their pens flying across legal pads. Within 48 hours, they had incorporated Mina Kim Designs, secured a stunning minimalist office space in a downtown high-rise with a view of the future Kanazawa Tower construction site, and drawn up a contract with the Kwan Group that was so ironclad and favorable to her that it made her head spin. It gave her complete creative control, a staggering budget, and a share of the project's final profits that was almost unheard of for an architect. She was a CEO now. She had a staff, hand-picked by Jae-hwa's people but approved by her, a team of the brightest young draftsmen and engineers in the city, all of them eager to work on a landmark project. Mina threw herself into the work. It was her sanctuary, the one place where the world made sense. She was back with her blueprints, her models, her calculations. But it was different now. There was no fear of her work being stolen, no need to hide her best ideas. She worked with a fierce, joyful abandon. The design for the Kanazawa Tower, already brilliant, evolved. She refined the lines, deepened the philosophy, pushed the engineering to its absolute limit. She was not just building a skyscraper, she was proving she existed. Jae-hwa was a constant, quiet presence in this new life. He did not hover, he did not micromanage, but he was there. He would appear in her new office late at night, finding her hunched over a light table. He wouldn't say much, he would simply bring 2 cups of tea, a specific, fragrant blend she had once mentioned she liked, and sit in the chair in the corner of her office, watching her work. Sometimes they would talk. Not about Marcus, not about the past. They would talk about the building. He would ask about the flow of light in the atrium at dawn, or the acoustic properties of the glass she had chosen. He understood her work on an intuitive level that no one, not even her professors in university, ever had. He saw the poetry in her math. One evening, as she was explaining a complex detail about the building's foundation, she looked up and found him watching her, his expression intense. "What is it?" she asked, a little self-consciously. "I am watching a master at her craft," he said simply. "It is a rare privilege." The words, delivered in his usual understated tone, landed with more force than 1,000 flowery compliments. It was a recognition of her competence, pure and unadorned. A warmth spread through her chest, a feeling so unfamiliar she didn't know what to do with it. She just nodded and turned back to her blueprints, her cheeks flushing. Their relationship developed in these quiet, shared moments. It was a slow burn, built not on passion but on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared sense of purpose. He provided the safety and resources, the impenetrable fortress within which she could finally create without fear. She, in turn, provided something for him, though she wasn't sure what. Perhaps a glimpse into a world of creation and beauty that was so different from his own world of acquisitions, strategy, and quiet, ruthless power. One weekend, he invited her to his family's estate outside the city. "My mother wishes to meet you," he said, the statement leaving no room for refusal. The estate was a traditional Korean hanok, a series of beautifully preserved wooden buildings with tiled roofs, set around a series of serene, manicured courtyards. It felt like stepping back in time. An old woman with bright, intelligent eyes and a spine as straight as a girl's opened the gate. She was dressed in a simple, elegant hanbok. This was Jae-hwa's mother. She looked Mina up and down, her gaze sharp and assessing. Then she broke into a wide, warm smile. "Ah," she said in Korean, her voice like old, soft velvet. "So you are the one with the strong eyes. He was right. You have a good soul." She took Mina's hand and led her inside, chattering away as if they were old friends. Jae-hwa followed them, a rare, soft look on his face. "She's already annoyed with me for not bringing you sooner," he murmured to Mina. "She gets that from me." The dry wit was so unexpected that Mina laughed, a real, unburdened laugh. He smiled in response. Standing there in the quiet courtyard with the scent of pine and damp earth in the air, surrounded by the quiet strength of his family home and the instant acceptance of his mother, Mina felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible, a sense of belonging. Meanwhile, in the world outside this calm sanctuary, Marcus Thorne was beginning to unravel. He had been publicly humiliated, his award rescinded, his contract terminated. But in his profound arrogance, he saw it as a temporary setback. He was Marcus Thorne. People like him didn't just disappear. He believed Jae-hwa Kwan had been temporarily bewitched by a pretty face, that Mina was a manipulative upstart who would soon be cast aside. "Give her 3 days," he'd snarled to his few remaining loyal employees. "She'll come crawling back. She can't do anything without me." 3 days passed, then a week, then a month. News broke of a new firm, Mina Kim Designs, heading the Kanazawa project. Marcus was apoplectic. This was not just an insult. It was an existential threat. He had built his entire identity on being the genius behind the tower. Without it, he was nothing. Blinded by rage and a complete misunderstanding of the forces at play, he made his fatal miscalculation. He gathered his lawyers, the best his dwindling finances could afford, and filed a high-profile, frivolous lawsuit against Mina Kim and the Kwan Group. The suit claimed intellectual property theft, breach of a non-compete clause, and defamation. He leaked the story to the press, painting Mina as an unstable, vindictive former lover and assistant who was trying to steal his life's work. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was creating leverage, dragging the reclusive Jae-hwa Kwan and the unknown Mina Kim into the messy public arena of the courts, where he believed he could win through bluster and manipulation. He was not playing chess. He was a fly, buzzing angrily, moments before flying directly into a spider's web that had been patiently waiting for him all along. In his silent, panoramic office overlooking the city, Jae-hwa Kwan read the news of the lawsuit on his tablet. Mr. Choi stood silently before his desk. "He is more predictable than the tides," Jae-hwa said. A note of detached amusement in his voice. He set the tablet down. "Is everything in place?" "Yes, Chairman," Mr. Choi replied. "The acquisition of his firm's primary creditor was finalized last week. We now hold all his corporate debt. The investigation into his other projects revealed 3 more instances of architectural plagiarism and significant financial fraud. The evidence has been compiled. The relevant authorities have been briefed. They are awaiting our signal." Jae-hwa nodded slowly. He had not wanted to simply crush Marcus. That was too easy, too crude. He had wanted to give him the time and space to destroy himself with his own arrogance. The lawsuit was the public stage Marcus had so foolishly built for his own execution. The groundbreaking ceremony for the tower is next Tuesday, Jaehua said. Don't ensure the press invitation list is expanded. I want every major financial and architectural journal there. I want cameras. I want a spectacle. And Mr. Thorne? Mr. Choi asked. A cold, thin smile touched Jaehua's lips. Oh, he will be there, he said. He wouldn't be able to resist. Make sure he has no trouble getting through security. Let him walk right in. The day of the groundbreaking ceremony was bright and crisp. A large, elegant tent had been erected at the construction site, filled with city officials, investors, and the cream of the architectural world. At the front was a stage with a podium and a row of ceremonial golden shovels. Mina stood at the side of the stage, talking to the lead engineer. She wore an architecturally precise dress of deep navy blue, her hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. She was nervous, but it was the nervous energy of excitement, not fear. This was her day, the culmination of a dream she had almost let die. Jaehua stood a few feet away, observing the crowd. He was, as always, a portrait of quiet control in a dark blue suit that fit him like a second skin. He caught her eye and gave her a subtle, encouraging nod. The simple gesture calmed her nerves instantly. Just as the master of ceremonies was about to begin, a commotion erupted at the back of the tent. Voices were raised. And then, striding through the crowd with a look of righteous fury on his face, came Marcus Thorne. He was thinner than Mina remembered, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose on his frame. His eyes were wild, feverish with obsession and rage. He had come undone. He marched directly toward the stage, pointing a trembling finger at Mina. "Her!" he shouted, his voice cracking. The crowd fell silent, turning to watch the drama unfold. "She's a fraud, a thief. This is my project, my design. You are all celebrating a liar." Security started to move toward him, but Jaehua raised a single calm hand and they stopped. He wanted this to play out. Marcus scrambled onto the stage, his face slick with sweat. He got right in Mina's face, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "You owe me. Everything you have, you owe to me. You think this rich bastard is going to protect you forever? You are nothing without me." Mina did not flinch. She did not shrink away. She looked at this man, this ghost from a past life, and felt nothing but a distant clinical pity. He was a relic, a hollow man screaming into the void. "I don't owe you anything, Marcus," she said, so her voice clear and steady, carrying across the silent tent. His face contorted in a mask of fury. He raised his hand as if to strike her, but before his arm could move an inch, Jaehua was there. He hadn't seemed to move, yet he was suddenly standing between them, his body shielding Mina. He didn't touch Marcus. He didn't have to. His mere presence was a physical force. "You have made a grave error, Mr. Thorne," Jaehua said, his voice dangerously soft. He turned and walked to the podium, taking the microphone. The large screen behind the stage, which had been showing a looping animation of the future tower, flickered and changed. "Good morning," Jaehua began, his calm voice a stark contrast to Marcus's frantic shrieking. "It seems we have an uninvited guest. Mr. Thorne has made some serious allegations. He believes something has been stolen from him. In a way, he is correct." On the screen behind him, a document appeared. It was a deed of ownership. "As of 9 a.m. this morning," Jaehua continued, "the Kwan Group completed its acquisition of the holding company that owns Thorne Architecture. Mr. Thorne, I now own your company. Every desk, every computer, every contract." Marcus stared at the screen, his mouth agape. Another document appeared. A list of debts. "I also own your debt, all of it. The loans for your firm, the mortgage on your penthouse, even the lease on your car. You have been working for me for the past month and simply didn't know it." A low gasp rippled through the crowd. This was not a business dispute. This was an annihilation. Mr. Thorne speaks of theft, Jay Hua went on, his voice like chips of ice. Let's talk about theft. The screen changed again, now showing side-by-side comparisons of blueprints. Mina's original designs for the Kanazawa Tower, time-stamped and digitally signed, next to 3 other award-winning buildings from Marcus's portfolio. The core concepts were identical, stolen from obscure European and Japanese architects. The evidence was irrefutable, laid bare for the entire world to see. And then there is the matter of fraud, Jay Hua said. Financial statements appeared on the screen, full of red circles highlighting falsified earnings and illegal kickbacks. A copy of this full report was delivered to the district attorney's office 30 minutes ago. I believe they are on their way. Marcus Thorne's world collapsed in the space of 90 seconds. The color drained from his face. His body seemed to shrink. The performative confidence, the arrogance, the rage, it all evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, pathetic man. He sank to his knees on the stage. No, he whispered. Please, please, no. He looked at Jay Hua, his eyes pleading, tears streaming down his face. He was sobbing uncontrollably, begging. Jay Hua looked down at the broken man at his feet, his expression unpitying. He had not done this out of anger. He had done it with the cold, detached precision of a surgeon removing a cancer. He had simply restored order. As if on cue, 2 uniformed police officers walked calmly into the tent and up to the stage. They helped a sobbing, incoherent Marcus to his feet and led him away in handcuffs. He didn't resist. The fight was gone. He was a ghost now, a cautionary tale. The tent was utterly silent for a long moment. Then, Jay Hua turned back to the microphone. His demeanor softened instantly as his eyes found Mina. My apologies for that unpleasantness, he said to the crowd. Now, allow me to correct an oversight that has gone on for far too long. He gestured for Mina to join him at the podium. She walked toward him, her legs feeling strangely steady. He put a warm, steadying hand on the small of her back. For the past 5 years, the most capable person in every room she entered has been systematically overlooked. Today, that ends. He looked out at the assembled press and dignitaries, his voice ringing with pride. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor to introduce you to the heart, the mind, and the soul of the Kanazawa Tower. The sole architect and visionary behind this project, the founder of Mina Kim Designs, my partner, Mina Kim. He began to applaud. The entire tent rose to its feet, the silence replaced by a thunderous, sustained ovation. They were applauding her, for her work, for her resilience, for her. The sound washed over her, and for the first time she let the tears she had held back for so long fall freely. They were not tears of sadness or humiliation, but of profound, cathartic release. Jay Hua gently took her hand, his thumb stroking the back of it as they stood together, facing the applause. He leaned in, his voice for her alone. You are safe, he murmured. You are seen. Later that evening, long after the crowds were gone, they stood on the now quiet construction site. The first foundation pile had been driven into the earth, a concrete promise of what was to come. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Mina looked out at the city skyline, the city she was about to change forever. The weight she had carried for years, the constant grinding pressure of being diminished and ignored, was finally gone. In its place was a quiet, steady sense of peace, a sense of being correctly placed in the world. He seems warm, she said, her voice soft. Jay Hua looked at her, a quizzical expression on his face. Who? Marcus, she clarified. In all the photos, he always looked so warm, like he was lit from within. She paused, reflecting. It was a performance. I think he was cold all the way through. Some people are like that, Jay Hua said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Hollow. They generate light but no heat. They exist only in the reflection of other people's eyes. He turned to her, his own eyes dark and serious in the twilight. You are not like that. You have an internal fire. It is why your work has soul. She finally looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw past the power and the wealth and the quiet authority. She saw the man who had recognized her from a set of deleted files. The man who had built a fortress around her so she could work. The man who respected her enough to unleash his controlled fury on her behalf. I don't leave because things become complicated, she said, echoing a sentiment she'd felt earlier, but this time it had new meaning. It wasn't a declaration of independence. It was a statement of loyalty, a promise. He understood. He always seemed to understand. He reached into a bag he'd brought with him and pulled out a white hard hat. On the side, in clean navy blue lettering, was the logo for Mina Kim Designs. He handed it to her. She took it, her fingers tracing the letters of her own name, her own firm, her own legacy. A real smile, one that started deep inside and reached her eyes, spread across her face. I have a meeting with the structural engineers tomorrow at 7, she said, looking up at him. We're discussing the revisions to the spire's resonance dampeners. I know, he said. I'll bring the tea. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't make a grand declaration of love. He simply took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers, and they stood together in the gathering dusk, looking out at the hole in the ground that would soon become a monument to her vision. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of shared understanding, mutual respect, and the quiet, unshakable promise of what comes next. It was the beginning of a family built not on fairy tales, but on honesty, complication, and the daily, deliberate choice to stay. A partnership of equals ready to build their future, one perfectly designed floor at a time.